The German government has reached a compromise over a controversial Chinese investment plan in the port of Hamburg. China's state-owned firm Cosco will be able to buy 24.9% of the Tollerort container terminal. Now, the company originally had a deal with the port to buy a larger 35% stake, but that was subject to government review. Several ministries expressed concerns over the acquisition, saying it would enable Chinese influence over strategic infrastructure. Hamburg now joins a long list of European ports that are fully or partially owned by Chinese companies if the deal is approved by Cosco. Here are some examples. Cosco currently controls 100% of the ports in Piraeus, in Athens, Greece, 90% of the Zeebrugge terminal in Belgium, 51% of the Valencia port there in Spain, 40% of the Vado Reefer terminal in Italy, and almost 40% of the Bilbao port in Spain. Now, along with two other Chinese firms, CMP and Hutchinson, Cosco now controls about 10% of shipping across Europe.
The port of Hamburg is Germany's largest and a gateway to the world. The Chinese shipping company Cosco has long been active in Hamburg, but now the state-run firm is eager to take a stake in the port. Critics warn China could gain access to critical infrastructure and Germany's dependence could grow. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz disagrees. This isn't about selling a port in Zeebrugge or Piraeus. At most, it's about a share, a stake in the terminal, which is also the case in some other West European ports. And it's about one of many very large ports. China wants to take a stake in the Tollerort container terminal, where ships from China have been processed for decades. The port of Hamburg, which owns Tollerort, has no objections to Cosco taking a stake. You can assume that this contract could serve as a benchmark for how to deal with the Chinese, to take a stake without infrastructure, without implementing any major shareholding opportunities. That's not the case here. But others are opposed. The European Commission has voiced its opposition. Last spring, the Commission warned that China could gain access to sensitive information about the port's business activities. This is usually a question for the entire European Union, and we are seeing Chinese investment in European ports increasing. And it's never good to become too dependent on a country, like we've seen with Russia. Ports are involved in 90% of international trade, so we are speaking about really critical infrastructure. A lot is at stake. China is by far the port of Hamburg's most important trading partner. Last year, it accounted for nearly a third of the port's container business.
Jacob Gunter is an analyst with the Mercator Institute for China Studies in Berlin. Jacob, welcome to the show. 24.9% stake, that's what the government now says it will allow for Cosco. Is that a win for the company or is it a loss?
Yeah, it's definitely still a win for the company. It clearly wanted to get a stronger position in this terminal for a variety of different reasons. And while the ideal would have been the 35% that it was aiming for, and it will no longer have the kind of sort of voting rights that it would have had with that 35% share, it's still a significant win. And it's not just a win in terms of them getting a 24.9% share. This is also kind of a broader victory for China in being able to continue to kind of keep prying the door open in Germany and in Europe more broadly for the investment coming from its big state-owned champions.
At the same time, we know that other shipping companies own stakes in terminals in Hamburg, for example, including Hapag-Lloyd out of Germany, Maersk out of Denmark, I believe. So what is the concern about Cosco? Can you spell that out?
Yeah, the kind of starting off, we need to understand that Cosco is not like a Maersk or a Hapag-Lloyd. It is a completely different kind of entity as one of these big centrally owned Chinese state-owned enterprises. And these are meant to achieve strategic goals for Beijing rather than to achieve the fiduciary responsibility that companies like Maersk or Hapag-Lloyd are kind of beholden to. So Cosco doesn't behave based on market dynamics the way that other shipping companies would. So starting from that perspective, that Costco is an arm of Beijing and part of its toolkit to achieve its strategic goals, I look at the idea of increasing reliance on Costco and increasing reliance on China's state-owned enterprises, both as shipping, but also both from a shipping perspective and a shareholder perspective, in critical infrastructure, quite concerning right after we've had another authoritarian government in Russia exploiting its position as kind of a critical provider. But furthermore, when we look at Costco, we need to just not think of Costco as one entity. It is owned by this entity called SASAC, which is sort of the holding company for the 97 state-owned enterprises in China. And these include some of the biggest companies in the world. And really, they create this value chain that is an integrated vertical monopoly. So Costco gets its ships from a state-owned shipbuilder that is also owned by the same entity. The steel for the ships comes from a company owned by the same entity, and on and on and on. And if you were to copy and paste that kind of economic model into, I don't know, Denmark or Germany or France, both EU and those member state competition and antitrust laws would immediately recognize that vertically integrated monopoly and the economic distortions that come with it. But for some reason, with China coming in with Costco, that's not part of the debate.
Jacob, what is this debate that we've seen over the past few days? What does it tell us, if anything, about public and political attitudes towards German business ties with China? What can we read into this?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can read into this the position that Germany in particular is in, sort of between a rock and a hard place, and that you have these big German companies that, you know, when you look at the EU investment into China over the last few years, the vast majority of it is coming from just a small handful of companies. Most of them are the big German ones. So there's clearly a lot more economic dependence and you know, desire for deepening economic ties from these big German companies. But then on the flip side, you know, you have a lot of pushback in Germany because of the broader geopolitical situation, plus concerns about over-reliance. But also you have the EU, where, you know, a lot of the EU member states have a very different relationship with China and very different views on China than what Germany does.
We'll have to leave it there. Jacob Gunter with the Mercator Institute. Thank you very much.